nap underneath the water. And then when it's hungry, it came and sloshed its way out, frolicked around the mountains, and ate what it wanted to eat when it wanted to eat it. And then went back, and guess what? You do not go swimming in the lake. Not because this thing would eat you, but just because you look at it and you're like, I'm not swimming with that in the water. Right? You feel a little weird thing against your toe. Nope. God, get me out of here. And it says, can one take him by his eyes or pierce his nose with a snare? The idea is, this thing cannot be tamed. It's not a thing you're going to catch. There's no catching this thing. It's just not happening. Right?
What would you do if you did?
You put it back. You throw it back.
There's no throwing.
That's a catch and release program. That's right.
I'm gonna throw this.
That's right.
Think of the size of them stakes.
Yeah, you don't even bother because you're like, good luck. You go get a steak and we'll just see you at the funeral. I mean, that's kind of the gist of it, right? Yeah. By the way, herbivores, if you start poking and prodding at them, are they willing to bite you?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah, they'll defend themselves. This is the thing that had the ability to defend itself. There's no question. So yeah, no, nobody mess with this thing. And then so he says, there's no catching or taming this thing, which spurs what is about to be said in chapter 41, where you hear about the Leviathan. Because he's basically saying, you can't catch that thing, now consider this. Can you draw out the Leviathan with a fish hook? The Leviathan's a whole different creature we're talking about now. Or press down his tongue with a cord. Can you put a rope on his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make many pleas with you? Will he speak soft words for you? Will the Leviathan be like, come on guys, let's all get along? No! He'll rip your face off! That's the gist of what's being said here. Will he make a covenant with you to take him as your servant forever? Will you play with him as with a bird? Will you put him on a leash for your girls? Literally says that. I didn't have to make that up. Will traders bargain over him? Will they divide him up among the merchants? Can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? This is a whole different thing. This thing is not like the behemoth. This thing makes the behemoth look like a children's toy. And the behemoth makes everything else look like a children's toy. He says, lay your hands on him.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the battle. You won't do it again. So you go ahead and touch him. You just poke at him a little bit. You won't make the same mistake twice. Right? Behold, the hope of man is false. That is, if somebody's thinking, I'm going to catch this guy. No, you're teasing yourself. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him. Who then is this who can stand before me? So he's like, Job, you won't go deal with this Leviathan thing, but you want to call me out. See what I'm saying? Verse 13, who can strip off his outer garment? Who would come near him with a bridle? The idea is about the Leviathan, can you tame it? Can you undress it? No. And the reason he says undress it is because unlike the behemoth didn't have scales. It was not a scaly thing like this. The Leviathan is a scaly thing. And so when he says who can take off its garments, he's saying who can get the scales off it. He's going to go on to say who can open the doors of its face. It's not talking about its mouth. This is a creature that had scales even on its face and even up to what?
Bring the garment with his piercing teeth.
Who can open the doors of his face, around his teeth, his terror? These scales came all the way up. You couldn't even get to the gums of this animal. The scales just came up and then teeth came out of the scales of this thing. There's no getting into this. That's why he says, who can open the doors of the face of this animal? This is an animal with scales like plating going across its face. Scales is not a great concept because you think scales and you think of what? Fish, right? These are not scales like that. These are scales like if you go down and you get plates of steel, and just like armadillo style, except 15 times as thick and 15, like a billion times larger, you know. So, verse 15, his back is made of rows of shields. shut up closely as with a seal. One is so near to another that air cannot come between them. Right? So, he's untamable, verses 8 to 10. You don't touch this, verse 13, untamable. Verse 14, scales on its face even to its what? Teeth. 15 to 17, scales down its back. Here's where it gets creepy, guys. His sneezings flash forth their light.
Fire breathing.
This is fire breathing.
Now, I'm wondering, I was gonna ask you, is this literal?
This is
Literal.
this is
Because,
no
you know,
more
you put
less
some-
literal than anything else. When he talked about the horses, he talked about the same kind of stuff. When he talked about the ostrich, there's never a point where the style of writing moves from fact to fiction. It continues in the same style of writing. And if you believe the ostrich is real, and if you believe the horse is real,
Then why not these?
then why would you suddenly say, but these are fiction?
Well, I mean, in the translation, I would think like giant snort of vaporized steam
Right.
shooting out with wood
So,
light, you know.
I appreciate where you're going, but as we continue on, for the guy who'd be like, but no, he's just using hyperbole to talk about flashes of light coming from his mouth. He's gonna he's gonna back you into a corner where you cannot use hyperbole. Because he's gonna talk about the fire from the mouth a lot. And by the way too, this would have been a chemical reaction going on in this animal. It's not like he has flint for teeth or something goofy like that. This thing can literally breathe fire. There's insects that can actually do that. The difference between, you have the bombardier beetle, which can actually mix chemicals and create an explosion. This is still not like that. Because the bombardier beetle can create an explosion, but that's not fire.
Just a spark.
Well, it's not even a spark, it's just a combustion. There's chemicals that combust but don't have fire involved in it. They're just chemicals that when they mix together, it causes gas to happen. You know, there's an exchange of chemicals that has an offset of gas, and the bombardier beetle can do that kind of a thing and throw himself away, right? This is not that. This is a chemical reaction that produces flames. And this creature, a bombardier beetle, can do that a couple of times, and he's out of gas. This is a thing where this thing can walk around, and going on a walk, this thing, if it wants to, it appears to be that it has the capacity to choose when it does it or not, but if it wants to, it can make a trail of burning terror, if it feels like it. So check this out. He sneezes, his sneezing flashes forth light, right? So he can control it, but he can also not control it. When he sneezes, guess what? That causes, so it's something to do with his sinuses, right? It's got some kind of, the chemical reactions taking place likely in his skull. His eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. So the eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. What I take this to mean is that the iris of the eye is actually horizontal. Like how you have, anybody ever seen a deer up close? You know, so you have human eyes, which are round, the iris is round. You have cat eyes, which the iris is up and down. And you have deer's, which the iris is left and right. And that appears to me to be what this is getting at when he says, his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. That there's something uniquely horizontal about it. Right? And where do we get, what's the root word for horizontal? Horizon. Right? Root word for horizontal is horizon. And when you're talking about the dawn, what are you talking about? Right? Talking about horizon, right? So, out of his mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils comes forth smoke as from a boiling pot. Burning rushes, his breath kindles coals. A flame comes forth from his mouth. Is he talking hyperbole? You see what I'm saying? He backs you into such a corner that if he was, and if you want to know if somebody's talking hyperbole, you just ask yourself this. If he is serious about this thing breathing fire, how could he have proven it? Like, how could he have been more articulate about it? What could he have said that would have made you believe that he didn't say? You see what I'm saying? He couldn't have really added to it. Unless he were to just say, Mykos, I know you're not going to believe this, but I'm not kidding, this thing with breathing fire. And then you'd be like, oh, what a funny guy, he's kidding. Right? So, In his neck abides strength, and terror dances before him. The folds of his flesh stick together. So, and by the way, too, it is the case with a scaly animal. The scales hold the flesh in a particular manner, so that if you were to move those places where your body can move, it would actually, your flesh would just roll backwards into another scale. It's not like your flesh gets the opportunity to actually stretch and go this and that. It actually has to stay stuck in between scales if you're just full of scales on your body. Right? Your soft flesh underneath the scales would have to sit put. So, in his neck abides strength. So, what kind of neck does he have? Huge neck. Right? Anybody not have any of the blanks up to G? Up to H so far? Okay.
Well, wait a minute, if one, you said iris runs horizontal and then and what?
Well, so I put left and right / horizontal.
Oh, left and right.
Left and right / horizontal.
Right.
Right. G, this thing breathes fire. H, it has a huge what? Neck. Verse 24. His heart is hard as stone, hard as the lower millstone. And I know it only says hard as the lower millstone, but I perceive this to be as well. Do you guys know what a lower millstone looks like?
That's what the grain is ground against.
So you have two millstones. You got one large, round stone that sits on a plane. Then you have one large round stone that sits vertical, but it's maybe only a quarter of the size of the large on the bottom. You put grain on it, and as it turns, this is a platform for the grain, and as it turns, the grain gets ground in between those two stones. The big, crazy millstone sits on the bottom, and it's called the lower millstone. So he says his heart is as a stone hard as the lower millstone. And I think part of this is saying, because he could have said the upper millstone. I think part of this is he's suggesting this thing is huge. It's got to pump a lot of blood. Right? Its heart pumps a lot of blood.
This is verse 24?
Yes.
Okay.
Its heart pumps a lot of blood. And it says its heart is hard as stone, hard as the lower millstone. By the way, how hard is the lower millstone?
Your translation says heart, because mine says chest.
Yeah, mine says heart.
Okay.
Mine says his heart is hard as stone, hard as the lower millstone.
Yeah. My translation says chest. I don't know why.
In any event, huge, tough, strong,
Okay.
right? I think both of them carry the same concept, apart from I'm just talking specifically about the nature of a pumping heart, but both of them carry the concept that this thing, you don't mess with it,
Right.
right? So, do not feed the wildlife. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. At the crashing, they are beside themselves. This thing is terrifying. Right? Verse 26. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail. That is to say, you can try to stab it, but what's going to happen? It's going to bounce off the scales. You're not getting through anything. Right. Nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He counts iron as straw and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. For him, sling stones are turned to stubble, clubs are counted as stubble, and he laughs at the rattle of javelins. This thing does not care.
This makes me, when I read all of these, it looks like man has tried.
Yeah.
Man tried those things. So,
If you lived in a city, and you're a gun guy, right? If you lived in a neighborhood of manly men, out making, doing the thing of manly men, and then this thing just happens to wander by.
well, hunting,
That would be exactly what you'd go say, guys, let's get some javelins. And you would do it once, and you'd be like, we're not doing that again.
No, Mike would say it's go for the big gun.
Right.
Till somebody, as a redneck things, till somebody gets hurt.
Right. It's all fun and games, right? That's right. Verse 30, his underparts are like sharp potsherds. So it apparently has smaller scales underneath, but you're not getting through those either. He spreads himself out like a threshing sledge on the mire. You know what a threshing sledge is, by the way? It's a piece of wood. You would put grain down on the ground. It's a piece of wood, and out of the wood, you'd have basically little pieces of copper. We might say like $50 worth of copper coins that stick out of the piece of wood, all over the piece of wood. And you'd have a guy stand on the piece of wood, and it'd have a rope come up to the front, and you'd have a horse, and he'd whip the horse, and the horse would drag you along, and you would stand on the sledge, and that would cut up and grind up the grain, but The reason it does it is because underneath the wood you've got little pieces of sharp pokies poking out. Okay? That's what a sledge is. So he says, his underparts are like pot shards. He spreads himself like a threshing sledge on the mire. Right? So this guy, his scales that have got too, they've got little pokey, I don't know what you call them, things sticking out, protrusions sticking out of them, which they themselves would tear you up just if he drug it across you. You'd be wishing you didn't mess with the thing. He makes the deep boil like a pot. Think about that. He makes the deep boil like a pot. What can this guy do? He can produce fire underwater. This thing can even produce fire underwater. That goes to show too the nature of the chemical reaction going on in this. It doesn't require, it's not a chemical reaction that requires oxygen to burn. Whatever is going on with this thing can produce its own oxygen from the water. Can get the water hot enough that the hydrogen and oxygen actually separate, and that is sufficient to allow for the flame. That's insane. That's an insane thing to go on there. And he makes the sea like a pot of ointment. Behind him he leaves what? Behind him he leaves a shining wake. Behind him he leaves a shining wake. So this thing can actually burn things as he goes, and even what you find is that as it goes underwater, it appears to be that even as he goes underwater, what can he do? Leave a shining wake behind him. So whatever he's breathing out can even continue burning. Maybe it's some kind of liquid, sticky, pasty liquid, something that just continues burning even underwater. It says he leaves a shiny wake, right, behind him.
I think it's like oil,
Yeah, something weird.
shiny oil.
Something weird. One would think the deep to be white-haired. I don't know what that means, but I don't like it.
What was that again?
Be old.
Behind him, verse 32, behind him he leaves a shining wake. One would think the deep to be white-haired. And now I will tell you, looking around some of your guys' white hair, one of the things about white hair is it shines and sparkles and glitters, right? On the earth there is not his like. There is nothing like this thing in all of creation. There's not anything like this guy. The behemoth is not like this thing. The alligator is not like this thing. Right? A creature without fear. He sees everything that is high. He is king over the sons of pride. The concept he sees everything that is high may mean either he's really, really tall. It may also mean he's got the capacity to fly.
Flying dragon.
Let me ask
Fire
you,
breathing dragon.
He's dead. He's dead now. But I mean, what you have really here, the thing that I can think of in historic accounts that most fits it is a dragon. I mean, that's the thing that most fits it. Yeah.
sir, when was Job written?
Job was written probably around the time of Abraham.
So,
But not after Abraham.
first, second century Ming Dynasty, they go into this, and if you was to read the dynasty the way it's written, they refer back to Job, to this right here, and what is China's, ancient China, what is its,
So it's funny you mention ancient China.
yes, but
Ancient China has a calendar for each of its years. And it is interesting that if dragons have never existed, it's just interesting that if dragons have never existed, you guys know some of the years, the animals for the different years that they have. Call out some of the animals they have.
Rooster,
So
snake,
let's do it one at a time. So is a dog a real thing or a fictional thing?
real,
Is a rooster a real thing or a fictional thing? Is a rat a real thing or a fictional thing?
real.
Is a root, what's the other one?
Snake.
Snake, is that real, or monkey? Are these real things?
Yes,
Guess what one of the years is?
dragon.
Dragon. It is just a weird, logically it's a weird thing to have an entire calendar of real animals and we throw a dragon in just to be silly. Yes, sir.
What if or something, then snakes had legs.
Say again?
Snakes had legs.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah, so this, right here too, it says specifically that there's nothing like it. And I understand that we want to have it, we want to be able to point at something and say, this is like that. Whatever this is, the Bible says there's not an animal like this. And I get it, by the way, too, because this animal can breathe what? Fire. So it is not, I mean, like I say, if you were trying to tell somebody that there is a real life thing that breathes fire, can swim, and can even breathe fire underwater, and can see the tops of the high things, now that, like I said, that either means it's really tall or it can fly, right? If you were trying to describe that and tell somebody, you don't understand, this is real, how would you better describe it? What more convincing argument would you make? And that's where I just say, this is the struggle with people looking at this and saying it's hyperbole, you know, it's an alligator type thing. It specifically takes the extra step to say there's nothing like this, right? My argument would be, this is something that is not like anything that is around today. And it can do wild and crazy stuff, and it was alive during the time of Job because he never makes a transition from regular animals that we know existed. The only thing is, we don't know what this is. That's the difference. And so, if you're going to say it becomes fiction when I don't know what it is, if that's your standard, I don't understand this, therefore it's fiction. See, you got to decide what your standard is when you read the Bible. At what point do you determine it's fiction? At what point do you determine it's reality? Because everything read like reality, and then it just started going into this. And if it is the point where we don't understand, then we say, oh, well, then that's fiction because I don't understand it. That's not a very fair line of reasoning. See what I'm saying? So I would argue, like I said at the beginning of the class, by the way, none of this stuff here, if this is a dragon, if it's not, if I'm terribly confused and it's a mouse that just got stuck to a sticky pad and got some checker pieces stuck to it, that's running around and terrifying everybody. Whatever is going on, if you think I'm stupid for this thought or not, doesn't make you or me go to heaven or hell. That's not what does it.
That's what's written.
It's just interesting along the road.
Interesting stuff, right? Like I said, you may or may not like where I land on this. I think it was the closest description that we have of a dragon, which other historical records have as being something that was not fiction. But we now talk about it as though it's fiction because it isn't around right now. And that doesn't seem like a fair way to treat history. But
One quick comment. During the Pamir, the ancient people in that area of Siam and stuff, they also have paintings and not scripture, but statements that's written down that how they understood certain things that was happening during their era, and they described it as
History.
dragons.
right, yeah, history has a clear recording of dragons. We just take that and say, well, it's talking about a dragon, therefore it must be fiction. But history doesn't present those. There are some cases where history presents those events as fiction, but we would do that. That doesn't make horses fiction. If we write a fictional story that has horses in it, that doesn't make horses fiction. You know? So, we're going to finish because there's 3 more things, and that's a silly place to stop if we don't. Verse 4, Job admits what he previously said. He says, I hear, this is Job quoting himself. He says, hear and I will speak, I will question you, and you make it known to me. Job points out that that statement was out of line. That's Job pointing out. He says, I know you can, Job answered the Lord, I know you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? And Job is speaking about himself. Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Hear and I will speak, I will question you, I'll make it known. I should not have said that stuff. That's what Job is saying there.
He's apologizing.
He's apologizing, right? Then you get verse 7 through 8. After the Lord had spoken these words to Job, Job said to Eliphaz the Temanite, my anger burns against you and against your 2 friends, for you have not spoken what is right of me, as my servant Job has. Now therefore, take 7 bulls, 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up a burnt offering for yourselves, and my servant Job shall pray for you. For I will accept his prayer, not to deal with you according to your folly. And so what we find is that a godly man prays for his adversary. godly man prays for his adversary. And verse 10, just the very first piece of the sentence there, and the Lord restored the fortunes of Job. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. Exciting stuff. And there's more exciting stuff to come, because now guess where we're at, guys? Amen. That's going to be a whole interesting scenario. I'm still wrestling with how we're going to do with this class, because it doesn't, so far we've taught everything in the realm of history, because everything's just been historic. And now we're getting into poetry. So the literature is a different style of literature. It might even require a little bit different style of teaching, so we're going to have to wrestle with that. So with that, let's go ahead and go to God in prayer. Larry, would you mind leading us in prayer?
Our dearest Heavenly Father, again we come before Thee, thanking Thee that what You have given us and how we use it. And dearest Lord, we ask Thee that You even go with this understanding out into the world, spread the word, that we understand it better. And dearest Lord, we're most thankful for Your Son who gave His life and shed His most precious blood for our sins. In Christ's holy name we do pray. Amen.
Thank you for being here.
I'm going to visit Japan, and I see some Japanese